Welcome, welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday. Thank you for joining myself, Da- uh, Donna Meller of Pass the Big ABA Exam, Dr. Stephen Eversole of BDS for BCBA exam prep, going beyond the modules and the manual. All right, so you guys have joined us for just about 2 hours today. Thank you so, so much. I'm going to put a very important chat message into the chat box, and I'm going to pin it there for you. So this way, if you have any questions whatsoever, it might already be answered in that chat message regarding the recording or any technical issues you may be experiencing, should you experience any. Please review that pin chat first before putting any troubleshooting kind of questions into the questions box. Otherwise, feel free to blow it up with questions. I will answer the ones that I personally can, and otherwise there will be some time for Q&A with Donna and Steve later on. But alrighty, let me shut myself down and turn this over to Donna and Steve.
Hi guys.
Hello.
It, it's great to be here. I'm Steve Eversole. I'm the founder of Behavior Development Solutions, and I've been a behavior analyst since the late 70s. It was around 1976 when I read Beyond Freedom and Dignity, and that B.F. Skinner sold me at the time, and at that moment. So I was been a behavior analyst ever since. So that's what I pursued my career in. I won't go into any more detail. I think that's enough of that. I started BDS in oh yeah, I started BDS in 1998. And actually, before the board existed, it was going to be a training program for people preparing for the CBA credential that was in Florida only at the time. Donna, you want to talk a little bit
Yeah.
about yourself?
Yes, sure, just a little bit. Hello, I'm Dana Meller. I am the founder of Pass the Big ABA exam. I have been in the field of ABA a little bit less than Steve. I did not have some of those personal early experiences, but been in the field for over 20 years. And we started Pass the Big ABA exam in 2012. So also just a little bit later. But I do want to say what an honor it is to be here. To be here with you, Steve, you who I consider the pioneer of exam prep. As you know, I personally used the modules when I took the exam, and it's a product that I really love. Loved it, especially when I needed it. And so yes, so thank you for doing this with me.
Well, thank you. Um, yeah, way back when I was shortly after I started and the BACB started, I recall seeing Jose Martinez Diaz at FABA, and I knew Jose, and I had started up BDS, and he was doing the guided review through ABA Tech, and he said, Steve, we're competitors, but we don't have to be really competitive. We could work together. Let's do that. And so I really appreciated the way he kind of reached out to me as a colleague and suggested that we work together. And we never really collaborated on anything, but we never, the competition was always friendly. And so when Donna and I started to meet and talk at conferences, I was very pleased to develop that same kind of rapport with her. So we started talking and hit it off really well, right, Donna?
Yeah, we did, and we meet almost weekly, and for me, it's been just incredible having someone else in the same sort of niche space to bounce ideas off of and to ask questions, and you've really been like a mentor for me because you are expert all things. Well, actually, I feel like it's not just ABA prep stuff. You've been in the field so long, you're just a good bouncing board for, for so many things. But mostly you're just a really cool guy, and I think I'd want to be your friend even if we weren't in the same exam prep space. But what I really want is for you to play tennis with Mark, because I want to see. That's what I want to see is, can you play tennis as well as you can ABA?
Definitely not. I look forward to playing tennis with Mark. Um, okay, and yes, and I really appreciate you and your friendship and admire what you've done with PTB. So it's been a great relationship. So here's some things that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah,
Uh,
we've got kind of a mishmash of lots of different things. We're gonna start with a few poll questions, and then we're gonna move into talking about our missions and our philosophies, which we think are important because they hopefully they'll inspire your study course, because that's really what it's about. We're going to talk about making the decision about when to take the exam. We're going to talk about materials and what to use for studying. Of course, the how to study. We'll touch on all of this stuff, just a little bit because it's a lot of areas. And then, of course, some tips on things to do before the big day. And then we've got
and
another column of things. So many things.
yeah, some exam test taking strategies. Um, we if you're retaking the exam, meaning that if you've already failed it once and you're retaking, we've got some tips for you. Some exam details, not the questions. Unfortunately, we don't have questions that are on the exam, but some other details. And then we'll talk about the BDS products and the BDS prep tools, and then we're going to leave some time for Q&A. So Marissa,
Let's
let's do the poll questions if we can.
Alrighty, everybody. I am launching a poll question right now, so before I let Donna take over, I just wanted to give a quick explanation that you should be seeing a black box on your screen where you should select an answer and lock it in with the submit button. If you wanted to participate in these polls and have any technical difficulties, please review that pinned chat message. If you can't see that pinned chat, let me know in the questions box and I'll resend it.
All right. So Marissa, you're going to share each poll as we go.
Yeah, I could leave it up for, let's see, it seems about like the voting has stopped, so let's share these
Okay.
results.
Perfect. So the first question, and we were interested in these demographics, and we thought you guys might be too. And I'll read this aloud so that Steve can hear because he's got the presentation launched. So about 16 of the folks with us today, 11%, are between the ages of 18 to 25. 51% of our participants, which is about 75 people, are between the ages of 26 to 35. 32%, which is about 47 participants, are between the ages of 36 and 50. And 10 people, which is about 7%, are 51 and over. And 69% of the people here have voted. So we are missing a chunk of the participants, but that's okay. This will give us a little bit of a sample. So I think that's really interesting. But that kind of aligns with what feels right. With what we know to be true. All right, we've got a few more questions. So Marissa, we can launch the next one. This is gender identity, and we do apologize for only having the 4 options. The platform only allows for that, so that's the reason for the limited options. Okay, still some votes coming in. It looks like. Okay, so looks like we got 72% of votes. So 12% male, 18 folks, and 136 people here are female, with that's 88% of our participants today. Again, really not a surprising statistic. So thank you guys. All right, we got one more. Right, so when are you planning to take the BCBA exam? Okay, so wow, so 66%, 103 of you are going to be taking the exam in the next 0 to 3 months. So that's a lot of you, and that's really exciting. So congratulations on being so close to the end of this journey. 18%, about 29 people, will be sitting between 4 and 8 months. Then we have about 14 people, which is 9%, 9 to 12 months, and 11 people, 7% more than 12 months. And I'm assuming some people are probably still, those more than 12 monthers are probably still in school. All right, got a few more. All right, so have you taken the BCBA exam and passed? And this is going to let us know that maybe you're a supervisor who's here getting some information for supervisees. Okay, so it looks like we have about 16 people here, 10%, and 75% of the people voted. So not everybody, but us are. I have already passed the exam. So obviously you're here to collect information for your students or supervisees. And then we have 149 people, 90% have not yet taken the exam. All right, very good. Let's move on. Okay, so have you taken the exam and not passed? This, of course, will let us know and you know if you're in the company of people that might be in the same boat as you in terms of having to retake the exam or are first time exam candidates. Okay, so about 73% of the votes here. So 40% of the people here are going to be retaking the exam because they have not passed. And then we have 60% who have not yet taken the exam and not passed. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is just to get a sense of what everyone is using. All right. So very, very close. So looks like the CBA learning modules at 34 people at 21%. And again, we only have 73% of the vote. PTB, just a little bit above in the percentage, but not enough people for it to count. So about 25%. We've got about 24% of participants doing something else. And then we've got about 30% of our participants doing all of the above, which for us means that you're doing, a combination of all the things that are out there. Okay, I think we have one last question in this poll. All right, and this is just to see which option best describes you. Are you a candidate, a supervisor, a professor, or other? Okay, Great. So this kind of lines up with that other one. So we have about 141, 86% of participants that are exam candidates. We have 7%, which is about 11 people, credentialed supervisors. We have 3 people here who are professors. And just honestly, really amazing for the supervisors and professors that are here. I just love that you're taking such an active role in supporting your students and supervisees. And there are 9 people who are here that are other. Hopefully they're not stalking us or something, weird other. Hopefully it's that you're RBTs and you are considering the BCBA path. All right. Well, I guess we can move on. Thank you for sharing that. I hope that was interesting for you guys as well.
Yeah, no big surprises there.
No,
Um,
not at
what we
all.
figured would be mostly people that are going to be sitting for the exam, within the next several months. That's probably 90, well, whatever the percentage is, a very high percentage. So good. Okay, so we'll move on. Our collective mission and philosophy. Well, first of all, is fidelity and respect for the science. Um, Behavior analysis is, first of all, a science, and it's very important that we keep that in mind, and that we everything that we do stems from the science. Those foundational principles are really important. The Our procedures stem from that, and if we start to ignore that, then we're really in jeopardy as a discipline and a science. Um, Comprehensive instruction. You want to talk about that a little bit, Donna?
Yeah, I think when people start to seek out studying for the exam, one of the mistakes that people make is sort of treating it as this isolated thing that they just have to kind of like this thing that they just have to do to get it over with. And people often sound like they're looking for a shortcut to just sort of get it done. In my experience, I've not really ever seen a shortcut, but if there were such a thing, I would imagine it would not be effective. So I know that for both of us, for us, we actually have the live instruction piece, which is comprehensive. We cover the task list or the TCO. I'm still getting used to the new language. We cover the TCO in full detail. Obviously, we have to cram in what's close to 2 years of coursework, but we try to cover the important elements and support students who may have forgotten it, or at least hopefully remind them that they should be looking this thing up if it's not clear for them. And I feel like, Steve, the fact that you lead people to the specific areas in text, right,
Yeah.
is really comprehensive, because you're preventing people from just studying a test question, but actually going to that content area and getting that comprehensive information about any one
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah. Our course is organized according to the TCO. So, and yeah, we go into each area of that in depth, and develop questions and so on. So yeah, it's quite comprehensive.
Yeah.
Um, com- Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I know we've talked about this together, but we sort of joke around that it would sort of, I don't know, it wouldn't feel great to have a BCBA out there, right, who is not doing good work, and then everybody says, well, how did that person even ever get board certified? And if they, God forbid, said, oh my gosh, yeah, I just did the modules, or I used the PTB manual and I just passed, and yet they're not competent. That would make me very sad, because I don't want to promote, anything that hurts the field. Uh, any practitioner that's out there practicing that's not doing solid best practice work. So again, that's another reason that we don't approach this as a shortcut process.
Right. Yeah. It's very. We both share the value that we're not here to just to help people pass the exam. We're here to create competent, or help create, I should say. It's the universities are doing the heavy lifting, but we're here to help create competent practitioners.
And then if instruction is, well, for us, because it is more interactive. For me, one of the ways that I find that we can, kind of build up that intrinsic motivation for people to actually want to learn this stuff comprehensively is to create salience and create a sense of community, and for me to just sort of share my love of the science and in the way that I'm presenting it, sort of model that. So on one hand, there's the simplification of the jargon, but at the same time, I'm very intent on promoting the understanding of that dense jargony literature that a lot of people are afraid of and looking for something different. But the reality is the exam is going to be clinical language. And so we can break down these scenarios and the concepts in the simplest, most relatable terms. But at the end of the day, will that understanding generalize to a really clinical exam question? And I would bet not. And I think even early on when we first started the company, that was kind of my goal. We're going to be fun and it's going to be hip and colloquial. And we realized very quickly that that was going to be a disservice to the students, because sure, they'd have fun and they would learn things sort of superficially, but when it came to connecting it to their actual clinical work, they still struggled. So we've gotten more clinical as the years have gone on, basically in response to that being a really important component.
Right. Yeah. Making things understandable is important, and we do that, and by breaking things down and giving, well, we use a modified Bloom's taxonomy to develop our objectives and our questions. And but yeah, it is hard to kind of balance making things understandable and stringent, but yet also fun. So, one way that some people find our modules fun is by, because when you get to the fluency modules, you're doing them, under the pressure of a timer, and so it's sort of a beat the clock kind of element to it, and a lot of people find that fun. And but the biggest the biggest reinforcer, of course, is passing the exam, and getting through that and reaching your when you're studying, reaching your daily criterion of what, or your daily goal of whatever you set for yourself. So moving on to exam prep equals learning essential content. We sort of already touched on this, but basically, um, you think of exam prep as not memorizing material for the test. You got to think of it as learning the content in depth, because the test is probably not going to ask you to regurgitate definitions. It's the test um, is largely applied.
Yeah.
And so, I tell people, think of the test as asking the same question over and over again. And that question is, what would you do in this situation? Because you are going to be given scenarios, and you're going to be given clinical scenarios and conceptual um, um, statements in which you're going to have to analyze and respond to, and make the fine discriminations between what is and what does and doesn't represent a particular concept. Um,
Yeah.
and
And
then go ahead.
no, no, no. Finish.
Well, I was going to move on to understanding the
Oh yeah,
behaviors and
let's do it.
aspects.
I think you covered the essential content perfectly.
Okay,
Mhm.
so this is one that's really, is a very important to me anyway, because I think that you can be a practitioner of behavior analysis, but really not be a behavior analyst. Um, you really must know and appreciate behavior as a natural phenomenon. That we do not have agency, we do not have free will. We are a function of our physiology and our behavioral history. If you if you don't understand and respect that and integrate that way of thinking into not just your clinical work, but how you look at the world, then you're really not a behavior analyst. So for me, that is fundamental uh, to what I think is important to being a behavior analyst, and something that I certainly hope that every person who goes through our course comes away with having full understanding and integrating that feature into their behavior analytic thinking.
I love that you focus so much on that. And this was definitely your bullet that you added, but it made me think about something that someone said to me once that I often say to people who are studying this exam as if it's not connected to them, like it's this extra thing they have to do, which is that
Yeah,
behavior analysis is a way of life. And I know that sounds very dramatic and silly, but I know for me, having come from a more psychological, mentalistic background, some of the struggles that I had, early on in the academic portion of my career, was making that switch, and it made it difficult for me to memorize and form concepts because I was still not looking at the world through those philosophical assumptions and through those dimensions. And there was a moment that it all sort of switched. And when that clicked for me, I started to be able to grasp the content in a new way where I saw it globally and I could actually study it in a way that made it mine. It was my language that I was learning to speak, better and more fluently. So if you are sort of struggling with that worldview, it will affect how you take on exam questions and scenarios because you're going to lean into, whatever philosophy you live by. Because, like Steve said, it's an applied exam. It's going to make you think about what you do clinically. Hopefully, what you're doing clinically is behavior analytic. But if you're not a behavior analytic thinker yet, then you might do things clinically that don't really align with how you're being tested. So the more you can start to shift philosophically, I think the more these concepts become easier to grasp and understand. You sort of start to look at the world as an ABC, and then all of a
right,
sudden test
exactly.
questions are,
Yeah,
right, an ABC. And I even sort of do that with every test question. And how you study becomes an ABC, and how you talk to your husband is an ABC. What are the contingencies controlling this man not putting all his shoes away? And maybe that's just me. But um, but yeah, so I really see the value in that more than I think I ever have in the past, just having the philosophy underneath it all first and foremost.
yeah. Okay, so using behavior analysis to teach behavior analysis, we do that by, if you're familiar with how our course works, and I'll get into this a little bit more in more depth later, but we use certainly reinforcement, we use prompting, we use corrective feedback, we use fluency building, we use active student responding. So all those things that we know that have a strong empirical background are integrated into our instructional design model. So I'll just leave it at that. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
us as well, a little bit obviously differently because of the models, but also of course in the interactive model there is the reinforcement. We promote a lot of self-monitoring and self-assessment so that you don't find yourself studying the same way every week if those activities haven't been effective or fun. Looking at scores week to week. We also do fluency building. So we sort of amalgamate any principle that is conducive for learning, which is a lot of the principles, as you know. And what I found is that when you motivate the studier to be behavior analytic in their approach towards themselves, again, that pushes the agenda of the being a philosophical behavior analyst. So it's kind of a win-win. You
Yeah.
you you achieve more than just good study protocol.
Yeah. Yeah. And then personalized customer service, with us, you can send us an email or call us. We take calls till 11 p.m. at night. And we we frequently get compliments for our customer service. People really appreciate that we're available. Um, so
Wow. We don't take calls till 11 o'clock at night. I didn't realize that. Steve, I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I was using the modules, it was on a CD-ROM, and I spilled an entire cup of coffee on my laptop and had to get a new laptop. And that, of course, meant that my disk was ruined, or I don't remember if the disk was ruined or if I couldn't. It wouldn't load into a new computer because it was like for one device. And I called you guys, and sure enough, you believed me and you sent me a new disc. So I can attest to that amazing customer, not to mention how many content related questions you would answer if something, if I got stuck on something while studying. So I can speak to that. I'm pretty sure you've never had to call me for any customer service.
uh,
All right. So, but yes, I think that's important just so that, our students feel supported, because if they are going to invest money into studying with an additional resource, then they should feel like there is extra support, because you could do it on your own, obviously. But since you have entrusted us or chosen us, then, we try to be available to you, so that you have that, that you're not out there on your own trying to, make this happen. And I think that's part of it, is just not feeling isolated, which we often do in this field.
yep, right. And then reinforced by candidate success. Nothing. Um, every morning I get up just really being happy with what I do for a living, because it really makes me feel good knowing that we're helping people learn this material, pass the exam, become good practitioners, and then they go out and help thousands of people. So that's very reinforcing. That's what keeps me going. And I should be retiring at this age, but I'm going to be going for quite a while, I think, because I enjoy this so much. So it's very reinforcing to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. It has a lot of feel good. It also has some, some sad stories as well, because we also see people struggling and, just sort of getting in this hamster wheel, struggling with the exam. I was telling Steve yesterday that one of the things I miss about when the exam was only offered 4 times a year, I don't miss that at all. I think it's great that it's all the time. But the one thing I do miss about it is that they would announce the results on one day, like on the same day. So everybody found out on the same day. Oh, and it's also because the results weren't given immediately. Can you believe that people had to wait 45 days? And I remember that day because that's when Facebook and social media would go crazy with, all the big BCBA balloons, and the emails would start coming in, and it was like all sort of compounded together. And that was really fun. Now it's isolated, which is still amazing, and feels really good. But I do miss the big, exam results day event. It was like New Year's Eve for a lot of people.
And let me say one other thing about being reinforced by all this is, and that's the teams with which that work with us. I'm very happy with our team. All my employees. They're a great group of people, and of course I couldn't do this alone. And together, with the team, and then you with your team, we're training thousands and thousands of people a year. So it's very, very rewarding. Okay,
100%. All
so
right.
let me move on.
Yes, let's talk about these people here and how we can help them.
Yes. Okay. So when should I take the exam? The general rule of thumb is as soon as possible. And with us, our most popular duration of subscription is 6 months, and we do recommend that for most people. Some people could do it in 3 months or less. Some people take a lot longer, and that's fine too. We have subscription lengths or durations up to 4 years. So, and you need to consider timing of completing everything. Dawn, you want to talk about that a little
Yeah,
bit?
Absolutely. I think, and Steve, I think you can dump all those bullet points because they all sort of
Yeah.
go together. You know, when you're planning what your journey is going to be, right? Your journey cannot look like anyone else's because you have your own set of personal circumstances. Maybe you didn't start your supervision hours immediately. You know, so maybe you've graduated, but you still have months to go, or maybe even a year to go before that's completed. Maybe you've already decided that you're going to be using BDS modules or one of our workshops. Maybe your coursework wasn't great. And, you know, I hate to say that, but we've seen pass rates, so we know that also exists. And so you're going to be doing some catching up and some compensating for what you might have missed. And maybe you had great coursework and you want to maintain all of the things that you learned. So as you're making that decision, really make it based on like what is truly reasonable and practical for you. And if you can't study on a regular basis because you have a family that that requires a lot of your time, or a job or two jobs as some people have, or more, then all of that is, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just about sort of considering all those things and making a plan based on the reality of your particulars, and just being honest about it. I know for me, I did not feel super prepared after my coursework, but that actually was okay because I also started my supervision hours late. So I had a good chunk of time after graduating during which I could prepare and catch up. And I needed that time because I was having to overcompensate for some gaps in my knowledge. And that was okay. Instead of being frustrated or mad, I just sort of did what needed to be done.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have anything to add to that, so we'll just move
Yeah,
on.
fun.
Get into this fun stuff. So coursework, general textbooks, um, applied behavior analysis. You know, the white Bible as they call it,
Mhm.
course, and then behavior analysis for lasting change. Now, what we've had a lot of our learners tell us is that the Cooper Heron Heward book is a little difficult to digest. The behavior analysis for lasting change is easier to read. And so sometimes it's best if you're struggling with a concept to pick up lasting change, read that content in there, and then go over to the adjacent material in Cooper Heron Heward and read it. In other words, lasting change helps you to understand what's in Cooper, and I would say it is good to if you understand behavior analysis for lasting change, I would seriously consider going back over to Cooper because they're going to word it in a little bit of a different way, and that might be word concepts and so on might be on the exam might be closer to how it's presented in Cooper Heron Heward than in lasting change.
It's also just a great thing to look at more than one source for an explanation. And I think the reason that you're going to see that the next the slides that we're talking about right now are the things that you should study, because this is what you should study, right? Then you don't start to review an exam prep until this is the stuff that you have taken the time with and learned. But if you're able to understand things in lasting change, and then you go back to Cooper and you understand it in there, then that's really terrific, right? Because that's essentially generalization. You're seeing the material presented in different language, not different language, but different voices, and both books have things that the other doesn't. So I think
Right.
both should be utilized. I'm not saying read both cover to cover, but as you're studying, if you go down the TCO, look up the concepts in both of those texts. I also really love this next one. To supplement these, because again, it has a nice dose of clinical language, coupled with some great examples. Oh, and that's the other thing why more than one textbook is great, because let's say you read a concept in Cooper, and and you they give you one example, and let's just say that example doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't quite do it for you, like you still need a little bit more. Well, then you go to another textbook and there are going to be different examples. So the more examples you get, especially of the concepts that you struggle with or the more abstract difficult ones, the better. And then you have, foundational knowledge. But this book I also really enjoyed, and I would reference it when I felt like I needed a little more. I still reference it when I feel like I want to explain something and I just want like another angle to consider.
Yeah.
And then of course there's the specialty books or the topic specific textbooks.
Yeah.
And I'll let you take it from here.
Uh,
Oh, or I
excuse me.
can if are you choking?
I'm all right. So Cooper Heron and Heward has, excuse me, some chapters on special on single subject design, but you really need a book length uh, a book length source for really learning and understanding um, single subject design. And I've heard that there's some single subject courses out there and VCSs that you could get through without ever having to get a single subject design book. So I recommend that you do that. And Johnson Pennypacker and Green is probably the one used and most popular now in the field, and very well written book. I remember I had the very first edition of this book, and that was really dense, but and it was a challenging read, but it was good. Okay, Supervisor's Guidebook. They cover what I like most about this is how Denny Reed and Parson and Green how they use behavior skills training and positive reinforcement, and it really you could see how they take our basic principles, mostly positive reinforcement, and apply those to supervision. Do you want to comment on this?
I do. There's a lot of articles, obviously, and other books that are out there on supervision, and I think there's a lot of value to a lot of those. And we even have a books we love, and I think where we talk about the different textbooks and articles and things that are out there. The thing about this one that's great for the exam prep portion is, especially with this new TCO, is that there are very specific designated sections for evidence-based supervision, which this book goes through step by step. And then it sort of fits in behavior skills training as one of the components of that whole evidence-based process. So it kind of, it kind of makes it easy to organize what goes where. And then, of course, you're going to want to supplement this with some of the cultural responsiveness and humility and, equity, diversity stuff that exists in more current articles and even books. But this one really organizes it in an easy to study way. So if you, most people probably use this in their coursework, but if not, this is a good one to have in general. I was going to say something about the textbook on single subject design. If you don't have the book that Steve showed, there are obviously other books, and it's really important to give that area extra weight and time and get a book about it, especially if you're coming from a program that did not have a lot of focus on the research elements, which from my experience with my students is a lot of programs. So if you missed out on those experiences, and by the way, that was me too. I missed out on those, and Steve, that wasn't you. You had a much more comprehensive education than I did. So I had to do, like I said before, a lot of catching up and a lot of self-teaching, and reaching out to colleagues and saying, can you help me with this and explain this to me? And so I really relied on these textbooks that really organize it for you, and paint a picture so that if you haven't really seen it with your own eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then field work for supervision. You want to comment on
Yeah,
that one?
this is a great book, and I don't know that it necessarily will help you answer exam level questions, but um, Well, it will, because what it will do is paint a picture of what supervision looks like. And this is especially important now as more people are, taking the exam without actually having supervisory experiences. So I know that in my classes, I have a lot of RBTs, and I'm not really sure how they're getting the unrestricted hours, but whatever they're doing, it's not actually supervising cases, on the regular. And so here they are going to be tested on how to supervise, and they haven't ever seen, they've never experienced the supervision process firsthand. So this book outlines what that would look like. So when you become a supervisor, this is a great resource, but also you can, again, you sort of see the outline of how people who receive supervision prior to their exam, that is while they are a supervisor, what that would look like. Yeah.
Okay, ethics for behavior analysts. This is the fourth edition of this book. John Bailey has been the ethics guru in the field for, well, since we've really been focusing on ethics, and probably going on 20 years now. And um, yeah, John and Mary Birch do a really nice job of presenting a lot of good examples, and how for a lot of these ethics issues, it's not always a black and white answer. There's a lot of nuance in there and a lot of gray areas, and I think they address that very well. Also, John Bailey has been the heading the or running, conducting, doing the ethics hotline now for uh, probably a decade and a half or so. And so he hears all these stories. This is a phone call, a phone number that you call up when you're having uh, an ethical issue, and you could talk to John and try to come up with some answers for how to handle an ethical dilemma. But anyway, getting off track. It's a great book. There are some other books out there. Let me move on to the multicultural and diversity and applied behavior analysis. Um,
So this is really the only book that's out there currently, and it's not exactly a textbook. It's a series of articles. There are a lot of articles that exist. It's not going to be very difficult if you Google these terms and put ABA next to it. A lot of great stuff is going to come out. What makes this area really difficult to study, and even create content for studying, is that there, unlike some of the other areas, we don't have sort of the standard by which we're all practicing this. It's still kind of wishy-washy. Um, what these practices look like, and lots of people are writing about it, and there's not like one common language or one common source that everybody is sticking to. So therefore it's important to just get as much information as you can so that you can make fluid discriminations when you're presented with scenarios. um, Steve, do you think they're going to remove all the diversity stuff now? I'm not even
I don't think so. I hope not. But there is an issue with the fact that we don't have a solid science on behind us for this stuff as we
yet.
do for our practitioner skills. So that's something to keep in mind, that when you when you look at that stuff, it's like an add-on to our science. It's something that we need to consider. I shouldn't say it's an add-on to our science. It's an add-on to our practice as behavior analysts. It's For the most part, there's not much science behind it, but we're it's important, and we gotta move forward with what we have. So it will get better as time goes on.
Mhm.
Oh,
It is.
okay. So another book that I'm a big fan of is Radical Behaviorism for ABA Practitioners. If you're thinking that the that the foundational principles are not all that important, um, this book should help. to dissuade you of that thinking. What I was saying earlier about, if you still think that you have free will or agency, this is a book that will help you understand why you don't. And I think of the foundational principles. They're going to come in handy, particularly when you've done everything that you know to do, and that things still aren't working. That's when you kind of go back to, okay, what is the reinforcer here? What is the function? You re-ask those questions of yourself and come up with an answer, rather than, well, procedures X, Y, and Z worked with the last 5 clients. How come it isn't working with this one? So that's my thoughts on that.
You know what else?
Anything to
What
add?
we should, yeah, I was just going to add to make sure you stay current on the newsletter. That's not on our slides, but because I just realized one of your ethical responsibilities is to stay current, and one of the ways to stay current about updates is, the information that's shared on the newsletter, just in case they're going to test you on whether or not you have in fact stayed current. And I don't know that they would, but just in case. And there's
Yeah.
so many changes constantly. All right.
Okay. What what should I study? Okay, so here's some.
Articles.
Yeah, these are the articles. We're just putting a few down. Obviously, the current dimensions of applied behavior analysis that define the field. It's the 7 dimensions that I'm sure you all know. And then Iwata's seminal article on functional analysis. And then this final article is an article that will lead you to a bunch of other articles. They did a survey of the graduate training programs, which would be mostly the VCSs, I guess, and and what they were requiring people to read. Um, so, Donna.
Yeah, no, I agree. What's fun to do is go back and look at the dimensions after you've really studied, and then see how you can connect them to literally every section of the TCO. And if you can see the connection, you're philosophically a behavior analyst, and it's probably a good sign for
Yes.
the likelihood of your success.
Yeah, it's very impressive how that article has lived. It's a living article, in the sense that everything that they said in there is as important, and as it is as important now as it was when they wrote it. A few things have changed a little bit, like how we think about generalization and maintenance, but just slightly. Okay.
Right.
Uh, let's see. For
We're going
basic
to go into activities, I think, now.
yep, study activities.
Did you want to talk a little bit about Bloom's taxonomy and some of the key parts of it, or because I think it's an interesting thing to consider as you embark on prepping.
Yeah. We use Bloom's taxonomy to develop our objectives, and then hence the questions that we write to meet those objectives. And um, and we modify it a little bit, because some of it you can't do with multiple choice questions, or even short fill in the blank questions. But for each concept that we're teaching, we're going to have a definitional component, a example component where you've got to select examples, a um, to the greatest extent possible, a critique component, and a generation, an applied component. Actually, the applied component precedes the critique component. Um, and so that's how we develop our material comprehensively.
So, and the reason I wanted him to talk about that is because you can sort of apply that to your own process. And so this next portion, we're going to kind of just talk about the sort of different stages of studying. And you've hopefully started with the textbooks and the articles, and that's all the stuff that you did in your coursework, and hopefully you've got that down. And now you start studying, which is kind of bringing everything into your short-term memory, kind of connecting all the pieces, building up the ability to take all that knowledge and apply it to a scenario that's presented for you, which will of course require a couple of different skills. It will require being memorized on some of the definition pieces, and sort of knowing what concept goes with what. Obviously, understanding those concepts and then applying that understanding. So for early stage activities, right, for that memorization portion, a lot of people like SAF I know people use that in their graduate programs, and they use the standard acceleration charts to graph their fluency building. And I'm not a huge fan, only because I personally don't benefit from rote memorization. But if you're somebody who learns rotely and also understands what you have rotely memorized, then obviously this is a great tool. I did something similar, but it was more of a flashcard. So first of all, it's bigger, and it was more putting the information into my own words and then using examples and images and visuals. So each card was not intended to be timed and tested over and over again to make sure I could say them very fast in a minute's time, but specifically just like little practice notes that I could carry around and test myself or have other people test me. SAFMEDS, if you don't know, stands for Say All Fast, Minute Every Day Shuffled. So it's very much the procedure very much involves how quickly you can say the definitions to certain words. It's presented with like a fill in the blank. And again, it's a great, empirically validated process. It does have some controversy behind it, but effective for a lot of people. Flashcards is, for me, anecdotally, something that I really enjoyed. The mnemonic devices, obviously, we all do that when we're trying to memorize, whether it's creating acronyms or silly songs or visuals that make things a lot more memorable. And those are what we call early stage activities. That's kind of when you're kind of building up your toolbox so that you can, start to take on some of the bigger activities. One thing that the next bullet is that if you've done the BDS modules, then for each question there is a drop down that tells you where you can find the specific information in the Cooper Heron Heward book. And I think that's so fantastic. We talked about that earlier. I'll let you speak to that, but I love that a study source sends you to study further. I just
Yeah.
think that's terrific.
Yeah, let me next say something about SAF. Go back to the SAF meds a
Sure.
second. Um, yeah, SAF meds are great, but what you're presented with is a concise stimulus, and then you're making a concise response. And that is, like Donna was saying, that's great for early stage to learn some definitions or definitional components even. and but it's not good for application as far as I could tell. So. But you want to have that as a foundational skill, as a tool skill for later being able to apply, identify examples, apply, critique, and so on. Okay, and then yes, with the BDS modules, you have each question has a hint button. Each hint gives you a hint, and it also gives you a textbook reference, and we recommend that you use that when needed. When the hint isn't quite enough to help you understand what the concept is, then definitely go to the book, and then do the BDS modules to fluency. Um, it's the people who pass the exam and use our modules are those who completed all the modules to 100%. That's where we get that 98% pass rate for first time exam takers. But part of that though is also you. A lot of times you can get through the modules just by kind of memorizing the options. Well, if you catch yourself just memorizing answers, you really need to slow down, go back to the acquisition module, use those hints, use the textbook references, make sure that you really understand the material. Okay. And then, Dawn, you want to talk about the
Yeah.
PTB manual?
Yeah, well, I think obviously textbooks first, and our study manual, and is a great companion. So that if you do want a simplified explanation, the current version is, I did not mean for it to be almost twice the size of the previous versions, but I really did want to make sure that we had those relatable examples and get back into the heavy clinical stuff, just in case that was the main source of studying for someone, which I hope it isn't. But yes, the textbooks, and as you're studying, if you run into trouble, whether it's a mock exam, or it's you're doing the modules, or you're struggling with understanding those rote definitions, go back to the source content always, which I love, Steve, that your program sends them right back there. Also, like, I don't know, we can't really move on without just taking a moment to to just praise you for creating something that is a measurable criteria, like that you actually have something out there that gives people the security of knowing that if they achieve a certain measurable criteria, that their chance of passing the exam is 98% of people pass it. So I mean, something like that, right? But
Yep.
that's really miraculous and really hard to do in this sort of very individualized and subjective space. And I just want to commend you on creating something like that. It's ahead of your time. It's really spectacular.
Well, thank you very much. As you know, it's been a long road.
Well,
And then you want to talk about the
yeah.
your
I
lecture series?
Yes, and it doesn't just have to be ours, of course, but those of you with long commutes and not a lot of time for studying, there are, resources out there where you can fill your commute time, your doing chores time. If you go to the gym and that's not something you're going to cut out during studying, whatever your cardio activity is, there are resources out there where you can, get the information audibly, and that's great. It's really about finding creative ways to fill your time with study activities, and varying those activities, so not just doing one thing. I know, Steve, we talked the other day that you've heard, and I've heard the same, with people saying that they've taken the exam multiple times and their only source really was just studying SAF meds. So
Yes.
they're basically a robot, spout out any definition, but that one modality is just, it's not going to give you that global understanding and application. So being creative, sitting down, doing modules, and working on a measurable success rate, and then taking those times when you're in the car and you can't do a module, right, to listen to something, or if you're at work or on a break, cracking open the manual, or using your SAF meds in those moments. So filling those appropriate free moments with different types of activities, so that the material will enter you some way.
Thinking behaviorally, we want a variety of different stimuli to evoke the the correct responses. Okay, so interacting with the material in different formats, whether it be audio and the way question format, as in the CBA Learning Module series, or textual formats in the books and your manual. All that is different stimuli, and your response output is going to be different as well. Everything from selection to and well, we'll get into other things too, but uh, yeah, just
Yeah,
different thinking behaviorally. And then mock exams, we're going to talk about mock exams more later.
yeah,
You might be surprised what we have to say about those, but that is a mildly recommended way of studying, but we'll get into that later.
yeah,
And then, yes,
yeah.
very important. Go ahead.
You sure? Okay. Well, we just talked about how, Steve has this sort of measurable way of assessing readiness. But this is not measurable in the same way, but something that, I hear a lot from students is, if I've taken all these mocks and I got these percentages, does that mean I'm ready? We're going to address how reliable or valid mock exam scores are in a minute. But something that is valid is being able to go down the TCO item by item and talk about it. And I don't mean just like talk about it superficially. I mean, talk about it like this is your native language and sit down with a colleague and talk about it together. Like if I called you out right now and said, hey, let's talk about domain B3, could we, engage in a conversation about the content and equally, right? Like experts, like
And
ex.
yeah, and explain it as if that's what I think is good, is as
Yes.
if somebody asked you, could you explain this to me? And then you go ahead and explain it.
And if they understand it better because of your explanation, that is a really good sign that you understand it. And then for the more practical applied stuff, can you do that thing or study it like you have to do it tomorrow, or like you have to teach someone else to do that tomorrow? And if you can go item by item, which will take you a long time because it's a pretty thorough list of items, if you can do that and not feel like you're talking about something that, like if I were to study for like a car mechanics exam, everything would be very, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I read this manual, so I'm going to see if I can wing it. Not like that. Like this is what you do for a living. And, I also like to use this analogy. If your doctor was taking their board exam, how ready and how well would you like for them to know the content that they're being tested on? Would you like to think that they just took, 20 mock exams and somehow that led to a successful outcome, or they did just their SAF meds? That's probably going to impact your experience with that doctor. So how fluent do you want to be, or if you're a parent, how fluent do you want your clinical people to be? But anyway, but that is a good way to assess how ready you are. um,
Okay.
so yes, I just kind of wanted to say that if you are going to be using SAPMEDS and flashcards, which is of course an early stage item, um, we do have SAFMEDs. I know I said I don't like them, but uh, people do. If you do like them and you do find them valuable, the nice thing about SAFMEDs is they don't have to be in your own words. So, and you don't want to create them yourself, then we do have a product. And then we have this new thing that we kind of came up with, which is kind of like you put your chocolate in my peanut butter. We call it a flash med. So it is a flashcard sized item, and it's got a little corner with the SAF Med definition, but it also leaves all that extra space for your own, words, your own examples, your own visuals, which sort of combines what I like and what the rest of the world has been doing. So again, if you need something to kind of motivate you or to give you the list of, I think it's over 500 cards in the box. Anyway, we do have something like that, and you can also create your own, which is also very acceptable.
Okay. And then the CBA Learning Module series, we've been around since 1998. It came out at the same time the board exam came out. Currently, the current version has over 4,000 questions. The questions are organized according to the test content outline, and each question has a question stem, three options. I think there's still some with four options, but we used to have four options, and we found we could cut it down to three. But if you select an incorrect option, you get corrective feedback. If you select the correct option, your reinforcer is just to see the next question. Or in the early days, we had some sort of positive praise statement, and then we realized people got bored with those, and it was just boring and distracting. And I had statements like, "Oh, your mother would be proud," but anyway, we got rid of. And then also each learning module question has a hint, and the hint has a textbook reference. Most of the hints do not give you the answer directly, but some of them do. But the point is that you need to think about it a little bit more, engage in some interverbal behavior that leads you to the answer. In addition, we also have unit tests for each domain, and professors are using those somewhat, and those would be good for individuals to use as they're preparing for the exam. We also have a mock exam, and we'll talk a little bit more about mock exams later. But anyway, it takes the average or the median the median time to go through the CBA Learning Module series is right around 80 hours. Um, but some people do it in far less than that. Some people do it far more than that. So there's a lot of variability in there. The important thing is that you don't look at these learning module questions as these learning modules as quizzes. They're not quizzes. They're learning modules. They're designed to teach, not test. The mock exam and those unit tests are assessments, but the bulk of the course is designed to teach the content. Um, I'll just leave it there, and we'll go back to you, Donna, with the exam
Yeah.
here, or the manual.
Well, so something that's pretty awesome with the new task list, and you can see it's just giving you a little sneak peek into the manual, is that you can actually use it now with the modules as you're doing the learning component. So you can have some more supportive stuff. So you look it up in Cooper first, or the manual first if you just need a little reminder. And now with the way that the TCO is, we were able to just sort of go in order as well, which we hadn't completely done in the past. It felt too much like a laundry list. Now this TCO was a little bit more conducive to that process. So you're able to pair this with any other activity that covers the same content. So again, it's just I want to say it's shorthand, but it's 500 pages. So it's how short is that? But yes, it's a good resource. There are exam tips, there are hints, there are mnemonics, there's breakdowns, there's formulas, and there are also examples. So I think it's a nice supplement for whatever other activity, specifically the modules, I would hope that you're, participating in.
Okay, optimize your study environment. I'm going to try to pick up my pace here a little bit,
Okay,
Donna, since we're
sure. I think we're
already
okay though.
since
Yeah,
we do
we're
have 4. Okay.
yeah, but yes, of course, it's always better.
Yeah.
um,
Okay. So schedule time for study activities.
mhm.
Um, like we were talking yesterday when I was developing the CBA Learning Module series, I had to schedule myself and put contingencies, pre-MAC contingencies on my behavior uh, to get it done, because I had to, for most of the time, I scheduled 3 hours a day. Sometimes it was 2 hours a day or whatever. And you just have to have that, put that structure into your life. Maybe when you're preparing for the test, that's the first thing you should focus on, and go to how to self monitor and self reinforce your own behavior. Um, so
Mhm.
that's critical.
It
Remove.
offsets your guilt too. So if you're out and about doing something else, like if you're out to dinner, or I was very young and I was single and I wanted to go on dates, but if I went on a date, I felt guilty that I wasn't studying. So having a schedule will make it easier to have some balance too. So this
Right.
is not a study time. It's okay that I'm having a little bit of fun, but just a little.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Remove
distraction.
or minimize distractions. I think this picture tells it all.
Yeah, not everybody has
Sometimes,
that luxury, right?
right, right. Sometimes life gets in the way. Apply the pre-MAC principle. Make the high probability behaviors contingent upon the lower probability behaviors. Yeah, when I was developing the CBA Learning Module series, to be honest, it was very grueling. It was hard for me to do it, to sit down and put forth the effort. And if I hadn't had a reinforcer at the end of my evening or whatever, it just wasn't going to happen.
And people forget to utilize that with themselves when you're studying, like to really have things that are specific for completing a study session. Don't skip on those reinforcers, even just small things, and also follow through. So like if the deal is you're going to study a certain number of hours or hit a certain criteria before you watch TV or something, and if you don't do it, then you don't give yourself that reinforcer. And it's amazing how if you can be, firm with yourself, um, how helpful that is.
Okay, increase study MO. So, um, yeah, this is what were we thinking of here, Donna?
Well,
Escapes me.
I was thinking about some of my students who set like big purchases or trips or something contingent on passing the exam. And I mean, from not silly things, but from things like, buying their first designer handbag to, going on a trip with their family or, going on a trip without their family. So, creating those again, we're back to the reinforcers, but not really allowing access to certain awesome things until it's done, but making that thing, something really big and valuable, so that
Yeah, sometimes that's just the
Mhm.
rule that you establish. When I get in my daily 3 hours of studying, then I'm going to get X as a reward at the end.
Yeah,
Immerse yourself into a behavior analytic milieu. Now, this is not everybody can do this, but if you can, great. Actually, you could do this online with study groups, and I know there's some study groups out there. But like we were saying earlier, it's good to converse with other behavior analysts um, about these different concepts. People that are studying for the exam, and also more ideally, if you could, experienced behavior analysts, people who've already passed the exam and have been working for a while. Um, and, for some reason in the last several years, it seems like proper use of the behavioral jargon has become um, less proper, less, more acceptable to use lay language. Now, granted, you do want to use lay language when you're talking with clients, but when you're talking with behavior analysts, you want to be as precise. Your language should be as precise as possible. So use that behavior analytic jargon, and make sure that you're using it properly. And so when you immerse yourself in a behavior analytic milieu with other people and you're all speaking the same language, and the proper use of the terminology and those concepts is mutually reinforced, then that's a very strong environment for developing and building your behavior analytic repertoire.
I agree. And if you're fortunate enough to have a supervisor that is, you know, somebody that will engage with you that way and will give you feedback if you misuse the language, those corrections are so great. And this last
Yeah.
bullet, when you're hanging out with other people that are also studying, you guys can, support and correct, and just sort of engage, just see how nerdy, just nerd out on all the jargon, and find behavior analytic, principles as they exist in your natural world. That could be a fun game. That's for nerds, but that's what we are, right? So we should be doing those nerdy fun games. I can have a salad or a burger, matching law, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Optimize your study environment.
Well, I think this
Study.
is going to sort of support what we've been saying, which is
Yeah.
the groups and having a buddy.
Right.
That's a
And
great strategy because you teach each other, you talk about it, you learn, you hear things twice because two people are sort of breaking it down or more.
yes. Yeah. Okay. Role playing exam day. We'll be
Yeah,
talking
this
about.
one. Yeah,
a little
I mean, this
more.
is when we get to mock exams, but this is more about, when you do take mock exams, and even when you're doing the modules, you can create an environment that is reminiscent of the actual Pearson VUE setup, so
Mm-hmm.
that, you're controlling for as many of the variables as you can. It's, maybe you get claustrophobic when you're in a cubicle. Maybe the chair is not so comfortable. And if you're somebody who's, very like, sensory activated, you might check what the temperature is, in case you want to know if it's cold or hot or whatever it might be. And Can you guys hear that? My dog. But The other piece is, of course, take the test and have a timer going so that you've got that stressor of timing. Use a whiteboard, create it, practice creating it prior to each test.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's some ways.
Okay. Now we're getting into mock exams. Okay. Here are
That's
the
great.
benefits. It does give you experience with the exam taking process. It's a rehearsal. You could evaluate your performance and build endurance at the same time. Sitting for up to 4 hours could be difficult, and this gives you practice at doing that. Um, Individualized feedback for further study. Most mock exams will give you that. Um, Progress feedback. If you're taking multiple exams, you can get you can see yourself progress. But the question is the exam you took last month the same as in difficulty as the exam you're taking this month? And so that's an issue. Comparison to others. In the CBA Learning Module series, you can compare your score to the median of all others, which is kind of nice. Makes you, um, it helps to indicate where your strengths and weaknesses are.
Mhm.
Uh, and then limitations, and this is what I think we both. I'm sorry, Don. Did I jump ahead? Did you have
No,
anything you want?
no, no. I think the benefits are clear. I think it's the limitations that really
Yeah.
deserve the most attention because so many people misuse mock-ups, really misuse them.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, should only be used after studying. It's not ideal for baseline measure. Um, yeah. Here's the thing: that the outcome of a mock exam is probably not predictive of your performance on BCBA exam. First of all, you don't. It's very unlikely that there's any research on your mock exam that indicates that um, it's predictive. And plus, the BCBA exam does change somewhat. So chances are it's not that predictive. A high score may lead to overconfidence. So, you get a great score on your mock exam and you feel you could relax so you don't study so hard. That's very, very dangerous. Similarly, you can have a low score that may lead to discouragement, which might also hinder your learning and your motivation to study. Um, Mock exams are only slightly instructive. It really doesn't teach you anything except maybe if you're given the answer to the questions that you missed, it will you might learn something from that, but you're better off to spend more time studying the broader context or the broader concept rather than studying the particular question that you missed. Um, it's yeah, it's an ineffective replacement for productive study. You're going to spend, if you spend, let's say, 3 or 4 hours on a mock exam, that's 3 or 4 hours that you're not studying. Um, Questions on the mock exam will probably not be on the actual BCBA exam. So,
I hope
because
not.
yeah,
Although
uh,
we were joking the other day that probably half the people who write BCBA exam questions probably went, at least half, went through the modules, which, they may not even realize that their questions are them from the modules, right?
Yeah, they may wrote it that way without realizing it. So,
Yeah.
and the other thing is, like I said, we have over 4,000 questions in the CBA Learning Module series,
Wow.
and there's only 180 questions on the exam. So there's bound to be some that are similar, um, just because there's so many, and there's only so many different ways to ask things.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, and then repeat use of the same mock exam is a threat to validity. If you retake the same mock exam, you're probably going to do better, uh, the second time around than the third time around, or than the first time around, and that's going to give you a false sense of confidence and a false sense of having made progress when you may not have actually made any progress.
Yeah, I want to just talk a little bit about this, just a little bit more about this, because this is a very important topic for me based on the experiences that I'm having with students, which is I'm seeing that a lot of people, whether they're my students or just just from listening and looking at some of the conversations that people are having in some of those public forums. Um, and one of the things is that people are getting their hands on as many mock exams as they can, and just taking them and continuing to take them. And then when they get questions wrong, they study within the boundary of that question. And if you think about every TCO item, how many possible questions could be written about any single item? It's an unlimited amount. So the chance that you're going to become fluent in, C7 by reading, by reviewing 3 test questions that covered C7, or even 10 test questions, is unlikely. And in fact, it's going to make you think you are, but the reality is there could be a question that's completely different or covers some other aspect. So when you get questions wrong on mock exams, you should not study from those questions. You should go and find everything on the section that mock exam is from, to make sure that you would be ready for any variation of that question or a completely different question on that exact section. The other thing is that there are problematic mock exams out there. Either they've given wrong information, or they're just not good questions. Either they're too hard and tricky for no reason, and hard in the sense that there's really not a right answer, or they're too easy. And again, to what Steve was saying, that you could have a false sense of confidence, or you can be discouraged by something that's really not an indicator of literally any of it, because there is no connection to how you do on mocks and the actual exam. Now, okay, one thing, of course, if you're doing really great on every mock that you're taking, does that mean you're going to do well on the exam? Of course, that's hard to say, but sure, I mean, that's a good sign, obviously, if you're doing well across the board. And certainly if you're consistently failing the mocks across the board, or not doing well, then that's probably a good indicator that you've got some work to do. But that's really the only way to look at it. It does not address the specific trouble areas, and it doesn't guarantee that you're ready to go because you have mastered a question. And the repeat use, this is a pet peeve of mine, and I would imagine, if I could take a poll right now, that many people do this, which is they take a test, they correct it, they get a little feedback on it, then they study, and then they take that same test again. And that is not a valid representation of progress. There's memorization that's also happened. So again, the biggest thing is, don't use mock exams to study. They are for looking to see, how you're progressing, of course, but also they're to give you experience with breaking down questions and figuring out what kinds of things you want to have on your whiteboard. What kind of things do you draw out or reference? What are some of the common mistakes that you make? Are they mistakes based on knowledge, or are they that you read too fast and you skip important information when your adrenaline is up, or maybe you don't have enough tools for eliminating options before you start to address or look for the correct option. Maybe you're not good at discriminating important information, which is probably a reflection of not being memorized and understanding what you've memorized well enough to know what belongs together and what doesn't. So, having a bigger grasp over the concept lists and things that go together and things that don't go together, the umbrellas and things like that. So just be really, really careful with the overuse of mock exams, or overuse if it's the only thing you're doing. If you take 100 mock exams, but you're doing all the other stuff, then I'm less worried for you. Anyway, sorry, that's my soapbox. That scares me, because it's usually the people that come and say I've taken the exam 10 times, and they give me the list of all the mocks they've taken, and I say, what else have you been doing? And it's nothing. Maybe SAF meds.
Yeah. And then what I hear sometimes is, people, maybe they've gone through our entire CBA learning module series, but yet for some reason they didn't do well on the mock exam. And so they call up or they email and they say, oh, it was something wrong, or they're really worried about their mock exam score. And then I say, yeah, but you completed the modules to 100%. You have a 98% chance of passing that exam. Don't worry about your mock exam score. The completing all the modules is more predictive than the mock exam, so don't worry about it.
Wow,
So
that's amazing that you can offer that comfort.
yeah, and,
Because
and see, the thing is we don't have good data on the predictive validity of our mock exam, but we do have good predictive validity on the efficacy of the
so cool.
series. So
Yeah.
okay,
Anyway, all right.
okay,
So, Steve, you want to just like dump all those bullet points, and we could sort of
yeah,
um, talk about it. Um, I think this is something you should be practicing with mock exams, so that you have some built-in strategies. Things like reading the last sentence first, so you know what the call to action is, especially if it's a wordy scenario. So, so that you can go back into the scenario and really look for the answer to that final question. That's not always a useful tactic, but when it is, it's really super helpful. If you're somebody who's, I call that like fast and sloppy. I'm like that. I'm one of those people. If you send me an email, I'll read the first part, but forget the last part, and then only respond to half your question. So I know this about myself, and I have to like take a deep breath and be just a little bit more efficient about things. So if you know this about yourself, then this is something to practice with your mocks, like just changing the way you typically do things, getting rid of answer options that are clearly incorrect, if you can, will also be very helpful. It increases your chances. Are there words that change the meaning of either the question or the answer options? Things like not, except, other than. A lot of people miss those words, and I know that because they'll say things like, the thing about this test is there were at least 3 correct answers, and maybe that's true, but I would bet sometimes the reason for that is they've missed the except, which would make 3 things, of course, right, and the right answer actually feels, wrong. So again, just ways to sort of assess if you're missing words. Make sure that you know whose behavior is being asked about. As the thing with negative reinforcement and punishment, sometimes people use punishment because it negatively reinforces them, and so make sure are they talking about the contingency for the parent who puts the kid in the timeout, or the contingency for the kid who's being put in timeout, right? One is punishment, one is negative reinforcement. I think, uh, Stephen, if you want to speak to this too, but the having the primary literature in mind. This is a relatively new field, and people are out there practicing, hopefully the same science, but there's variations in what they call things. Even though hopefully we're doing it the same, people have different vocabulary. And so even though this is an applied exam, and technically you're supposed to be applying your knowledge to it, and what you would do at work is essentially the question, the truth is you can't do that. You can't really think about it from your own personal experience. You have to think about it as, what does the primary literature, how does it describe this particular concept? So you do kind of have to, we call it put your board hat on, like answer the question from the point of view of the board that's not going to have as much variability in practice as you might have in your job. And if you've had more than one job, you know this to be true, right? They call different, the same thing, different vocabulary. And sorry, I said, Steve, you probably want to speak to this, and then I.
Well, I was going to say, we know that punishment is a real thing, but there's a a lot of places probably that don't allow you to use punishment,
Right.
and so they call it something else. And then consequence. This is one that always got under my skin. At work, they'd use the term consequence only as a punisher, when actually a consequence is, is a reinforce could be a reinforcer as well. So you gotta kind of suppress your language that might be used in your work setting, and make sure that if you see the word consequence on the exam, that you realize that could be a positive consequence or a negative consequence, a reinforcer or a punisher or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's an example of that. So yeah,
There's
and
also the specificity. So if you do find multiple answers are correct, just consider the option that's the most specific, or maybe there's some redundancy that can help you, like does it say x-axis and horizontal axis, or temporal extent and duration? So you could eliminate those things because they mean the same thing. And then of course the relevance to the question. Sometimes things seem right, but maybe you've got the wrong call to action in mind. So again, just having those strategies that you're practicing with your mock so that when you walk in there, all of this is just second nature.
yeah, and okay, and so also very important to check every word in your answer choice, the option that you're selecting, because the one, well, and also check every word in the question, because I know in the CBA learning module series, we have questions that, kind of like Donna was saying, if you're reading sloppily and you assume that a question is going in a certain direction, and it is, except for that one word, and it could be a negation word or it could be some other word, but that one word changes the whole meaning, and you get it wrong. So in the CBA learning module series, we know that this happens sometimes because there's some questions where people will, at a very high rate, select a particular wrong option, and we know exactly why that's happening. And so sometimes, depending on the situation, we might alter that question. But other times we don't, because we know that it's important that our learners um, learn that discrimination and learn to read very carefully. So, one thing that people get out of, answering these 4,000 questions is they become pretty good at that, at reading more carefully and making the fine discriminations that need to be made. And then finally, several options might be correct. I think you alluded to this earlier, um, Donna, that it's important to find the best option, because several of them could be correct. Okay, we ready to move on? While taking the test, um, it's important to flag questions to come back to if you're unsure. Yeah, you can do that on the Pearson View interface. You can flag a question that you want to come back to and review later on.
Don't overdo that though,
Yeah,
because you don't want to have to like redo the whole test if you can avoid it. The whiteboard, something you should have practiced and plan ahead of time, how you're going to use it for scratch paper, how you're going to use it to prompt your own responses.
yeah,
There is also there's a calculator on the computer. I suggest not doing the simple math in your head, for things like IOA formulas. Just use the calculator. You're nervous. It's not hard to make a calculation mistake.
yeah.
Um,
Use
Then,
use mental math in your real life, but on the exam, it's too important. You could
or
make a
don't,
mistake.
if it's not your thing. We've got calculators in our pockets.
Yeah.
Taking a break is something that I think is important, especially if you think about 4 hours of just sitting there. And I think a good way to plan your breaks is to look at where you start to sort of fall apart on mock exams. Like where do you start making mistakes that are silly because you got tired? And that might just be an indicator of your threshold, where you just need to stand up and shake it out.
Yep. And review your answers. But be hesitant to change your answers unless you're really confident that you made a mistake the first time. So a lot of times your first guess is your best guess. So be hesitant to change your options, your
We have
question.
our students collect data on how many test questions they've changed and they were
Mm,
wrong, and how did that affect their score, like had they just left well enough alone. And if
oh,
if that's a skill that you're not able to, or behavior you're not able to modify because it is hard to teach, an old dog new tricks, then we tell them don't go back and check your work. But that's only after you've really collected some reliable data, like you can see across several many mock exams that you do this very consistently, chronically, and you can't seem to stop. That would
yeah,
be a good indicator not
yeah,
to do that.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
right.
Advice for retakers. Um, Okay, take the retaker data with a grain of salt. Now here, I was just looking at the
Yeah.
pass rate data the other day. 54, the pass rate in 2024 for first time exam takers was 54%. Okay, that's first time exam takers.
Yeah.
For retakers, it was 24%. So that's half. But this is important. What's a retaker? A retaker is somebody who took the test twice. In other words, they failed it once and they're taking it a second time. Or a retaker is also somebody who's failed the test like 6 times or more. So, so if you're taking the test a second time, chances are there's a lot of people who take the test a second time and pass it. People who took the test 5 times, what's the probability that they're going to pass it on the sixth time, sixth attempt? It's not very good. So my point is that your data are mixed in with all those people who've taken the test and failed it several times. So therefore, the probability that you taking it a second time or maybe a third time, um, the probability of you passing it is probably greater than 24%. Um, so don't fret too much
It's
over that
daunting. It's
pass rate.
definitely
Yeah,
daunting.
right.
Yeah.
Getting close is still far away. If you got a very high score of 397 or something, you're only a few points away. You still are far away because remember that score of 400 is just passing. It's not a high score. It's just passing. And Donna, you probably want to say
Yeah,
something
no,
else.
just that you said it perfectly. That's the lowest possible score, and unfortunately, when people get that close, they don't think about it that way. They think of it as, I'm close, I must be really fluent, but really, essentially, it's about 76% that you need to pass. So if you didn't hit that, imagine you didn't get that C, and that's not fluent. And I only really say that not to make anyone feel bad, but only to say that you should still study. Again, you should study everything. You should study comprehensively from start to finish, because you don't get the feedback of what specifically went wrong. And since you don't know, you kind of have to recover all of your bases. I also think because we have the data to show that first timers do better, then, pretend you're a first timer and behave like a first timer. Because the one thing we know is true about the retakers is they have that score report. And with those pass rates, we know that's not a helpful bit of information, the score report. So if you ignore it and study everything, and treat it, treat a 200 like a 397.
Yeah.
Steve, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah. You want to certainly strengthen your weak areas. So you do want to focus on that, but you also want to focus on the areas that you did well in, because if you did well in an area, but there's still room for improvement, then that could offset a weak area in which maybe after additional studying, you're still having trouble with. So the
Hmm.
test isn't like, you have to get a certain score in each section. You just have to get a good total score. So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
yep, and
we're
I
going
said
to,
that. Yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
already talked about that, so we can move on
Okay.
to, yeah.
So, and of course, reevaluate your study strategies. One thing that really bugged the heck out of me is when I talk to somebody who failed the test and maybe a couple times, and they say, "Well, I've been studying my SAF meds," and I'm thinking, and I tell them, I say, you probably know your meds, backwards and forwards. You're focusing on the wrong thing. You got to change your study strategy. You got to focus more on application and more advanced concepts.
Hmm. Yep, agreed.
So get back to basics. For example, Cooper, Hare, and Heward. And
Yeah.
then there's should I persist? And this is a tough one because you know um, Dawn and I talked about whether or not we should address this, but it's hard to talk about, but it's important. And so, obviously this is a very personal decision. And if you decide not to persist and not to continue taking the test, you probably learned a lot anyway. If you learn to um, apply behavior analysis in your own personal life, all that education was money well spent. If you could be in a related field, you could do lots of things where you can apply your behavior analytic knowledge. So it's not for naught. Donna, you
But
want?
I just want to say that there are those success stories where people, took the test. I think the most I've personally heard was about 13. I'm not encouraging anyone to go down that path, but certainly if this is, your dream and you really see yourself there, and it's taking you a little bit longer than you would wish, just be honest with yourself. But also, people do beat some of these crazy odds, and uh, just seek some support and some help. And, it, like Steve said, it's a personal decision.
Yeah,
Steve, I think, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, and I have talked to people who have failed the test, maybe a few times or several times. But, and of course, this isn't necessarily a valid assessment, but, talking to them, it's like, boy, they really seem to know their stuff. And so if the hurdle is just, that you're not a good test taker, then but you really know your stuff, maybe you've been doing this for years, then yeah, it probably makes sense to stick it out. But if you've been struggling with the concepts and application and so on, it's like, maybe it's not for you. Maybe it is time to think about something else. But that's ultimately it's your decision. It's a very personal decision, and
Yeah.
uh, we'll be there to help you, whatever you decide.
Steve, I think we should jump to sort of the end of this and just share a little bit about our products, and then have some time for some questions.
I think that's
Yeah,
excellent.
because I think this other stuff everybody can find on their own. Yeah.
Okay, um, so CBA Learning Module Series, I talked about it, a good bit. I'm not going to talk about that much more, but just to let you know, we also have RBT Readiness, which is our 40-hour course, which also enjoys I believe it's a 91% pass rate,
Wow.
and or 90 point something pass rate, one or the other. We're like the fifth highest, so we're very pleased with that. And we have continuing education courses, 8 hours supervisory training. That's a Bailey and Birch product, which is excellent. We have live webinars. We have RBT exam prep, which is different than our RBT readiness. RBT exam prep is for people who have already taken their 40-hour course but have failed the exam. So this is, helps them to get through the exam. We have our journal club series, which I'm really proud of, because reading and discussing the primary literature, the peer-reviewed literature, I think is very important. Excellent. It's excellent continuing education. And also, we have the Center for Behavior and Climate, which is another division of our company where we teach climate change. We're very passionate about that because the climate crisis is the crisis of our times. We're also starting a nonprofit organization called the ABA Climate Coalition. So keep your eyes out for that. Do email me about this if you want more information or any of this stuff. And Donna, you're up.
Yep. So we've got it's a little different. We've got workshops. We've got the study manual. We have mock exams. We also have a streaming lecture series. So lots of different modalities. Our mock exams are peer reviewed. They're very academic, very much like the exam. Lots of other activities like the SAF meds and the flash meds. So multimodal study aids. We've got some free downloads and things up there that could be helpful for you. And of course, if you want any information, I see that Marissa put links for our products and our website. So please feel free to check it out or email us if you have any questions. We'd love to work with you.
Okay.
I think
So
we can get into our
our Q&A time.
Q&A. Yeah.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, thank you, Donna and Steve.
Thank you,
A few
guys.
people have put questions into the questions box already, but feel free, everybody, to start putting your questions in there while we um, get to answering. All right. So this is one that I really liked, actually. I notice this a lot when I answer support calls and emails. So I noticed that the BDS is a little confusing because there's times where you have the same question and different answers for it. More so, the exam is taking 3 hours plus. How can one cram in all the questions?
Okay. So let me answer, just that first question about the confusing part. We have in a single module, we might present the same question multiple times, the same question stem. Okay. And then the options for that question, though, are different for each time. So the question stem might appear 3 or 4 times, but but the options are going to be different. So we do that for a couple reasons. One, so that you focus on the options, and so that you read carefully, and also it helps you to make the fine discriminations that are necessary to really learn the concept. And yeah, so that's oh, and one other thing is it helps. It's actually a more if you realize that, then it's a more efficient way to present material, because rather than presenting all of those questions, all of those options as a correct option, you could do it in fewer questions if you present the same question once and then have multiple options. I know that's a little hard to understand, but just
It's
take
for
my word.
learning. It's not a test. It's a strategy for learning the material. So it's
Right,
strategic.
right. And so if you see a question and you say, "Oh, I already answered this. I know what the answer is," and then you select the same option that you selected earlier, you're probably going to get it. Well, you will get it wrong.
Yeah.
And those questions are going to be questions where all of the above is one of the options. So so that's how you handle that. And then the question about the 3.5 hour exam, what was that again, Marissa?
That the exam was like 3 hours and how to get through all the questions.
Yeah, actually, it's not difficult. Very few people run out of time.
It's 4 hours.
Um, yeah, it's 4 hours, and so you're only answering 180 questions in 4 hours. So that's less than, well less than a question a minute.
Yeah, like I think it's 185 with the 10 pilot questions
Yeah.
for the
Right.
BCBA. Yeah.
So there's what, 4 times 6, 240 minutes in 4 hours, and you're
It's
given 100, you got to answer 180 questions. So um, that's more than 2 minutes a question.
yeah.
So yeah, it's not difficult.
Yeah, with fluency will help with the speed.
Yeah, right.
Awesome. Alrighty.
Next.
So if I have PTB fifth task list book, how different is it from PTB sixth task list?
Well, it is different because I redesigned the whole thing in terms of just its presentation. What's not different is that the science is the same, right? It's just, it is definitely presented quite differently, and it includes all of the new additional information. Plus, I've updated some of the previous stuff to, to reflect some of the more current literature because it's science, so it's constantly changing. If you've used fifth edition and you've taken the exam and you haven't passed, one of the nice things about the sixth edition is it's almost like reading a whole new book, right? It's got all new visuals, all new examples. So in that regard, it won't feel like you're getting the exact same product. This time we really, really made it quite different. All new quizzes in the end. It's like I said, it's a completely different book. But as far as the content is concerned, the science is the same. But the fifth edition, you will have to do your own due diligence to identify the things that are missing, which you can do with the free download on our website. It's called the Crosswalk to the sixth edition, and you could see what is new to the sixth edition, and you'll know that that's not going to be in the fifth edition manual.
Amazing. Alrighty. So let's see. Do you have any thoughts about or suggestions for people utilizing various YouTube videos to study? It's hard to know which are effective and have validity.
Mm. Uh, yeah, I tend to avoid social media, so maybe Donna could respond better than I can. Some of I know when we were looking for videos for some discrete trial training stuff, I couldn't find any that I felt were good enough to use. I'm sure they're out there, but Donna, you go
Yeah,
ahead and respond.
I mean, look, I think anytime you got a video, there's something about that that's, can be very helpful. Maybe someone's explanation, gives you that needed extra thing. But I wouldn't use those again as your primary resource. You've really got to make those textbooks the primary resource. And then, if you come upon something in the textbook that feels a little dense and you're not understanding it, then what you can do is, do a Google search and see if there are videos that are explaining it. One thing you might look at is, who's the person who's delivering the content? Are they a reliable source? And hopefully you've been studying the textbooks enough to be able to discriminate when someone's explanation doesn't quite fit the criteria you've been reading about. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it as a supplement as long as it's not the main source.
Yeah, and I will say this. Several years ago, we found somebody had plagiarized our material and put it up on the internet on one of these flashcard sites, and we found it and we had it taken down. But what they did is not only did they steal our stuff, but when they put it up on social media, or on this website, they got it wrong. So so it's like, you could be learning something wrong, but it might be right. I would say, if you can vet it some way, ask a colleague, somebody who's already certified, if they would trust it, then maybe you could put some credence into it. But otherwise, I would be careful.
Mhm.
Awesome. All right. So, people say once you fail it once, it's very hard to pass because the questions become harder. Is that true?
No, the questions don't become harder. It might seem to be harder to pass, but no, they don't get harder.
They have a large pool of questions. You might even get the same questions. You never know. They have lots of different forms that are created from this pool, and yeah, I mean that's it's not possible that they would be able to control it that way. Each test's form is evaluated for difficulty, and their whole goal is to ensure that everybody gets proportionally the same level of difficulty. Now, that's very subjective. So, is it possible that your second test has more of the stuff you don't know? I mean, I guess that could happen. That would be an unfortunate coincidence, but
Yeah.
probably other things make it feel harder, like the stress.
And the second test might have less of the stuff that you don't know.
That's right.
So
That could be a lucky break. Hmm.
yeah, it's funny how these myths just perpetuate themselves. I remember this myth has been around for 20 years,
Yeah.
or 25 years even. People have been saying this, but it's just not true.
Hmm.
Awesome. All right. So, for the questions that may have more than one correct answer in the BDS modules, but it's looking for the better answer, is that the type of topic material likely to be part of the weighted questions on the exam?
Um, we almost all of our questions, the options, all the wrong options are actually wrong. Um, that's one way that we differ a little bit from the exam. So I could say that. Now, as for weighting, um, the questions on the exam, I don't believe are weighted. They're not weighted for difficulty.
Mm-mm.
They're weighted in probability of correctness. It's not like one question is worth more than other questions.
Mm-mm.
Uh, Donna, you want to
Yeah, no,
say
I
something?
think the actual exam is weighted. The form is weighted, and that's why they have to
Right,
use scaled scores. So that
right,
400 points means something different for each form. So it could be this many correct for this form to pass, and a different, slightly different. I mean, we're talking by a few questions, and this form might be a little more difficult based on their assessment, of course. So maybe fewer questions are necessary to hit the 400 to pass, but individual questions are not weighted, but they might contribute to a change in how the whole form is weighted if somebody say has an unfair amount of what they consider to be difficult questions. That's why you never get to find out how many you got right or wrong, because it would be mayhem, because it probably wouldn't be it wouldn't look fair.
right, right.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So, I'm a multiple test taker. One of my main struggles is the time component. While taking mocks, I always have 30 minutes to an hour to spare, but during the exam, I find myself running out of time. Do you have any advice?
Mm.
I guess you'd have to think about why you run out of time. Do you go extra slow and because you're trying to be very efficient, or is it because you're finding the questions on the exam more difficult and therefore harder to answer quickly? Also, I would wonder if you're taking the same mocks over and over again. So, of course, that's going to speed up your response. If you're finding the exam questions harder, then I would say you just need to study more, because and the mocks that you've taken aren't reflective of the difficulty level on the actual exam. But if it's just some sort of like nerves that kick in, then you probably need to do something different.
Yeah, and also maybe engage in some activities to build your fluency. If you're using the CBA Learning Module series, that's one way to do it.
Yep.
If you're using other materials, I'm not sure, but I would focus on on building fluency.
Yeah. It's always important to sort of assess the function, like what do you think is the reason? Because it's a really hard question to answer not knowing you, right? And people often ask, what should I do given this? And the first thing that needs to happen is you need to figure out what is it that's causing you to go too slow. And once you have a better understanding of that, then you would address that particular concern, accordingly.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Do you have any recommendations or best practices for unrestricted hours?
For unrestricted hours.
I mean, a job as a supervisor or a job where you have supervisory relationships, responsibilities. But it's been a minute since I've done that. It's really hard. I mean, it should be something. Oh, maybe this is a supervisor asking. Um, yeah, if you're a supervisor asking and you are working with people whose job is RBT level, um, yeah, you have to be really creative and you have to find, ways to give them responsibilities that are supervisory in nature. Um, and I know that is a barrier because I know I worked for a small company and it was really hard because of course the owners didn't want to, pay for that extra stuff. And sometimes it really just requires that the supervisor work a little off hours and support people without getting, paid for it. Which I'm not advising that. I'm just saying that's what I've seen have to happen. But I don't. I do believe you should get paid for your time. So please don't take that as anything, other than what yeah. It's just that practically, it's a tough situation.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Yeah, it's really tough. If you wanted to email me, and you give me a little more context, I could maybe give you some more practical advice. But I'd need to know a little bit more about why there's a barrier. And you can use the email on the page right here.
Awesome. If you answer the pilot questions right, how will that be graded?
It won't.
Right.
Nothing, nothing. It stands for nothing. Yep. And that's not for you, it's for them.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, that seems to be all the questions that we have in the box.
Awesome.
Okay. Well,
Well, thank
good.
you so much.
So, let's see. We have. You know what? We didn't. Yeah, we got our web addresses up there, our phone number, our emails. So if there's anything that you want to ask us, please just email us, and we'll be happy to respond.
Yep.
This has been fun.
It has been fun. I think that we've got a couple little questions for you guys too at the end.
Oh
So
yeah.
yes, please take a moment to answer them. And yeah, thanks for spending the afternoon with us. We hope this was helpful. And there's a space for feedback. So if you have other things you want to suggest that you'd like to hear us talking about, um, maybe we'll do another one.
Yeah.
I'll have to bend Steve's arm, but
Yeah, no, this has been fun. I really appreciate that. I enjoy interacting with our learners and potential learners and so on. So I hope we can do this again.
yeah, definitely.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much, Steve and Donna. Thank you all for attending. Please email support@bds.com. I will be on call tonight to answer any of the BDS related questions, but feel free to also email help@bigABAexam.com as well. Sorry, that's a mouthful.
I know it's
But all
we're gonna
right,
shorten it.
everybody.
We're gonna shorten it.
That's what we had to do too.
I
But all
know.
right, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you guys. Bye bye.
Thank you.